Q&A session, and we have a few questions that have been sent in. The first question: during this pandemic, we are all encouraged to get vaccinated. Vaccine is basically killing the viruses. So if we accept the vaccine, are we considered breaking precept number 1, to refrain from killing? How do we go about it? Also, we need to remove termites that are damaging our property. If we encourage pest control service to remove the termites, again we are breaking 5 precepts. Same scenario as vaccination, I guess. Appreciate it if Ajahn explains how to go about it. Sadhu. Well, I think most practicing Buddhists, Sangha and laity don't consider a virus a living being in the normal definition. Like this first precept, we say panati pata. Pana means breathing, as in anapana sati. So living, breathing creature, something usually that you can see. So it may be a very small little bug, but something that's breathing that you can see. If you intentionally kill that, then you're considered breaking the precept. However, a virus is not usually classified as that kind of living, breathing life form. So it's quite normal for people keeping precepts to still take vaccines, medications and so on. Bacteria, vaccines, viruses, different illnesses that we treat. We usually treat that differently. So it's not considered breaking the precept by most practicing Buddhists. Many or most Sangha that I have heard of have taken the vaccine. Often one takes a vaccine not simply to protect one's own physical health, so that you can practice, of course. It's also out of compassion for others, because the advice is if the more people who are vaccinated, the less chance the disease, the virus, will spread around. So it can be, you can get vaccinated out of compassion for others as well. That would be the main intention in your mind, the volition behind it, rather than trying to kill a virus. With termites, that's a difficulty. In Australia we have them, in Asia we have them. Again, your intention is to keep the precept. So deliberately killing a termite would be considered breaking the precepts, because it's a living, breathing creature. We once had we have termites in our forest here, and we once had termites come into one of our buildings, which is right next to the forest and right next to a termite mound. So they started coming up through the concrete and eating the timber walls of the building. So as monks, we didn't want to kill the termites, but we found a product we could paint onto the wall. So we stripped the wall down, had to open it up, paint the product onto the timber, and then the termites didn't want to eat the timber. So they came up, but then they went back down again, because it was like, oh, this meal is not delicious, I don't like it. So they went back home again. And once they'd gone back home, we tried our best to seal up where they were coming in, and they've never returned. So it's a bit like, maybe you have a stray cat come to your house and you put down food it doesn't like, well, it doesn't come back, does it? So you do your best sometimes you can see if you can discourage them. The best, of course, is preventative measures. So in Australia and in Thailand, you try and build in a way that you won't allow the termites into your building. They're happily eating fallen logs in the forest, but you try and build in a way that prevents them coming into your building. So there are many methods to do that. One is chemicals in the soil around your building base. Others is using just techniques to fill in the holes or block the holes where they come up, and you do your best. If they've already got into your building and they're way into it, well, that's a tricky one. What do you do? If you're a monk, maybe you meditate and you send your thoughts to you send your metta to the termites and encourage them to go and eat elsewhere. Whether that will work or not, I don't know. I've stayed in a wooden hut before with termites eating it, and they were far too established in the building, in the hut, for me to get rid of them. So I just lived with them. And every night I could hear them eating the very the floorboards that I was sleeping on, because they were quite near where my head was. They're quite noisy eaters. Crunch, 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 crunch. So when you get a lot of termites, there's a lot of eating going on. So basically I just had to live with them until that building fell down. Once it's fallen down, then the termites can't eat it anymore because it's gone. And then you rebuild, and you try and rebuild in a way that you prevent the termites coming into your building. So if you've got termites, look into is there a way to prevent them without killing them? And sometimes there are solutions. If you're keeping a precept, that's giving you that motivation to try and find a solution to the problem, where you can keep your precept, but you solve the problem at the same time. The convenient way is just kill them. That's what pest control or whoever will tell you. But maybe there are other options, and you have to explore, at least do your best. That's what I would do, to see if there's any way to prevent them or discouraging them from coming into your building. And you do the best you can. So with our health, we do try to do the best we can with medication, vaccines, whatever. I would have thought, you can appreciate your body is your vehicle for doing good. So, we do generally try to look after our bodies to keep them as healthy as we can. Eat healthy, exercise, take medicines when we're sick, so that we can live in the world in a healthy way longer, so we can practice the Dhamma. You just have to do the best you can with these different situations. Dear Ajahn, this question is regarding meeting myself again and again when I face old age, illness and death in what is happening in my loved ones. My eye sees what my heart feels and fears. My actions are my belongings. I understand this. I am facing two scenarios in my life right now. Both beings are in poor health and are not able to chant, or maybe too late to grow faith, mindfulness in the Buddha Dhamma. My grandma is very old, wheelchair bound, and is weak now. I have a family pet dog who is 15 years old, losing its sight, hearing, and cannot walk on its own. The pet dog cries a lot when he needs to move his body, and then the vet has given us a choice to ease the dog's suffering or wait a while longer. Both beings are my loved ones, both are in poor health. How can I practice for them since they can't practice for themselves? Please guide me, Ajahn. How can I practice bravely, being here for myself as well as for them when it's time to let go? Please teach me how, with deep bows. Thank you. Well, you've mentioned a few things there. You said, how can I practice for them since they can't practice for themselves? So that is one thing we can do for those who are very old or frail. We can continue our practice and dedicate it to them. If they're too old to meditate, listen to Dhamma, or do much, they can't do much for themselves, we can at least practice for ourselves and then share the merits, send our thoughts to them every day, and honour our birth. If it's our parent or grandparent, we put effort into our own meditation practice and our Dhamma practice. We put effort into cultivating wholesome states of mind, abandoning unwholesome states of mind. That's all very powerful good karma, which is kind of giving more value to our birth. And in turn, it's giving value to our parents and grandparents having brought us into the world and being a part of our past and part of the reason why we came into the world. So at the very least, we can put lots of effort into our practice. And the more you meditate, maybe the more you can send thoughts of loving kindness and develop some genuine samadhi and send that back to them. They can also feel your presence when you're with them. So there's the practical side of caring for them. Obviously, we care for our loved ones, even pets. And if our mind is in a more wholesome state from our practice, even if they can't communicate with us, they can't speak, maybe they're too frail, too infirm, they're unconscious sometimes, but just the good energy and wholesome mind states we are developing can also have a subtly good effect on those people, can maybe help them to calm down as we care for them, feed them, wash them, massage them, whatever we do for them. Our state of mind is going to help. If we are giving into our own anger or fear or anxiety and we're close to them, they're going to pick up on that, and it's going to help and not help them. It's going to be a cause for their anxiety maybe. That's even the case for pets. If you're meditating and trying to be mindful and develop the path of practicing kindness, compassion, animals tend to be pretty sharp on your basic mind state. So whether you're at peace in a wholesome state or you're with fear or with anger, they tend to pick up on that. So even an elderly dog, I would generally encourage you just to look after them until they die a natural death, just like a human, if you can, rather than going the way of euthanasia. And trust in your own good practice. The more we practice, the more we can do for those around us, either on the mental level and also in the practical sense of the physical needs of those people, or even the dog. And also, it's a lesson for the rest of us while we're not too old to see the value of practice. When you're healthy, your body is active, your mind is active, practice the Dhamma while you have a chance, because one day you won't have the chance. We all get old, and as we get old, our faculties degenerate, our memory goes, our ability to concentrate goes, maybe our ability to listen goes, or see, or communicate through speech. These are all finite things, and one day we won't have them. So while you are healthy and stronger, practice a lot. And even that, recognizing that your loved ones are getting old, but turning that around as a motivation for you to practice while you still have your strength. That's not being selfish, that's just being wise to the truth. And so they become like your heavenly messages. They're reminding you to practice because this is what lies ahead for me. Just as my grandmother gets old and dies, I will also get old and die. So she's even teaching you in that indirect way. And we just do what we can, don't we? If they are able to communicate, then talk Dhamma with them. Talk over good things that they've done in their life. Try to generate or stimulate the arising of wholesome memories and wholesome thoughts for them. Give them the encouragement to be patient with their own physical pain and the difficulties they're facing. If they can hear, then you can play Dhamma teachings for them, read Dhamma books to them, chant for them or play chanting to them. You do what you can while you can. And if it reaches the very end when they're sort of semi-conscious or unconscious, well, you can meditate and send your thoughts of loving kindness, dedicate your practice to them. There's always something we can do right to the very end. And we adjust what we're doing appropriately according to the situation. Next question. When in sitting meditation I could see an image of myself from about 1.5 meters away watching the meditator. completely separate. Would Ajahn please explain? Well, you might have to ask yourself as well. It is quite common, people meditating, they become calm, and then it's as if the mind seems to step outside their body, and then they're looking back and they can as if see themselves in their mind's eye. And it could be one of those experiences of samadhi of one level or another. It can be like this, and you get that sense of mind and body being separate, and at that time usually your body doesn't feel much. It can feel very light, at ease, doesn't have any pain bothering you. And the mind is as if still and just quietly aware back of the body. It could be a visual representation of that. Sometimes people get that when they're under anesthetic in a hospital having surgery as well. But meditators get it. But I would contemplate, if that does happen, just contemplate the impermanence of whatever is arising in your awareness at that time. Maybe contemplate the body. If you're seeing your own body, and just contemplate the very sense of ownership of that body, the identification with it, and as if your senses, your mind is as if looking back at this body. There's that sense of, well, this is just a person getting older, one day will die. And the mind knows that, but it doesn't have to be attaching to the body when it's having that kind of contemplation or reflection. You're just contemplating the body as impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. So you can contemplate from that experience and develop deeper insight into impermanence, unsatisfactory, and the selfless nature of phenomena. If at all you're concerned, what's happening, so you may be a bit of fear coming out or worry, just go back to the breath. So, if the very worst, just open your eyes, and then you'll find, that whole experience just dissolves. Or just take a few deep breaths, and you'll come back to the breathing, come back to the body. But if you're at peace and you're aware, mindful, you don't have to do anything. You just observe what is going on. And you observing a new way of viewing your body, as if your mind is separated from it, looking back at it in a more detached way than usual. And I imagine at that moment your mind is peaceful because you're just watching. The practice of vipassana is just clearly observing, clearly watching experience. And out of that clear observing, you're gaining wisdom, understanding. And your view is being educated by the experience. You're learning how to look at experience from a place of detachment rather than bias. Normally we're biased, so we have our loves and our hates and our fears and our wants and desires. And that biases everything. So you look at somebody, instead of looking at them as just a person, collection of 4 elements, 5 khandhas, 32 parts. We're looking at them as someone I like, someone I don't like, my friend, my family member, my this, my that. They're attractive, beautiful, they're ugly. All the biases of the mind come in. The mind is not coming from a place of mindfulness, detachment. It's just following its bias in the way it thinks and relates to that person that we see or are talking to or whatever. When you're meditating, you develop this increased sense of detached awareness and dispassion as well, where you're setting aside biases of mind and just observing experience as it is, whether you're looking at your own body or the body of others. And you're going beyond your normal perception of this person. Most people, they have their sense of self. They usually, you feel you're a certain way, you like certain aspects of your appearance, there's certain aspects you don't like. You have your whole background, character, personality, that's all joined in there. When you look at yourself, it's like a package. That's your self-perception or perception of or identity with a certain type of person that you think you are or feel you are. So when you see yourself, that's all there in the way you're looking at yourself. But now as you're practicing mindfulness, you're sort of questioning that, examining that more closely. And there's the physical side, which is just basically 4 elements, isn't it? Earth, air, fire, water, and that's something to contemplate. You see the hair. Unless you're a monk, you've got no hair. You see your hair, if you are sitting there in samadhi and you see an image of yourself, that hair, examine that hair. That hair is just protein cells coming out of the skin on your head, and that hair is subject to aging, goes grey as it gets older. It lengthens every day, eventually it falls out, or we cut it, or eventually it never returns. When you go bald, your hair never returns. That hair is subject to impermanence. It's unsatisfactory. There's no real lasting happiness or reliability in hair. Even though, temporarily we will say that, we say, oh, my hair is everything. If you're really attached to your hair, it's got to look good, and if it looks bad, you feel sad, annoyed. Hair is everything, some people say. But now, from this place of detached awareness, you're just looking and saying, hair is just hair. It's not a self, it's not a being, a person. It's just those protein cells, elements that have come out of the blood through the skin. It gets dirty, I have to wash it, it falls out, or I cut it. It's not a self. When I die, it goes back to the ground, to the earth, disappears. It doesn't last. And you can do that for every single part of the body. So you're changing your perception of the body by examining it with the eye of Dhamma, seeing it as impermanent, not self, unattractive. And you're learning about your body from that meditation if you train in contemplation. The basis of contemplation is samadhi. We develop mindfulness, states of calm. We compose ourselves, we calm ourselves, bring up the mindfulness, the awareness, so that we can contemplate, understand the truth, examine the truth of things. And one huge area of that is examining the physical body and our perception of the body, the way we view this body. We can, of course, also contemplate feelings, pleasant, neutral, unpleasant, the mind, the contents of the mind, so the mind states, the thoughts, the perceptions, the thoughts that are wholesome, thoughts that are unwholesome, greed, anger, delusion, non-greed, non-anger, non-delusion, contemplating them also as phenomena, not self. When we contemplate, we're bringing the mind to this detached awareness, which sees both physical and mental, the aspects of our person as phenomena that arise according to their own causes and conditions and then cease. So you have a wholesome mood, you have a mood of kindness. Well, there's causes and conditions that have led to that. You may be directing yourself to think of somebody or something with kindness, or it may be a memory that's prompted it. Or you may have a moment where you have a thought of anger, and that has its own causes and conditions. And when you're contemplating, you're depersonalizing the mental activity that you're looking at and seeing it as causes and conditions leading to one moment of a mental state arising, then it passes away. And you're seeing through to the fact that there's not actually a person in that. Everything has its causes and conditions, but there's no lasting person. There's a series of events, mental events and physical events for the body, mental events for the mind, but there's no one fixed thing in any of that. But that's what you're looking at. You're examining that truth to see if it is true. So when you have these experiences of samadhi, I would encourage to then go on and investigate a bit more, develop more, deeper understanding. Next question. Whatever we do and talk about, is it better to be mindful? Yes. Mindfulness is always a wholesome, beneficial quality. Something the Buddha praised, to be mindful, bring up mindfulness. It's praised, and it's considered always helpful and supportive to the arising of other skillful qualities of mind. So you could say it's an essential quality to develop in the practice. And one thing you learn, say like today we're focusing mostly on sitting meditation and developing mindfulness, and walking meditation to develop mindfulness in the walking posture. But the way the Buddha taught mindfulness is to practice it in all postures. So lying down, before you go to sleep, when you wake up, or if you're ill. Standing, if you happen to be standing for some reason, to be mindful in the standing posture. And then by extension, in all the activities we do. So sometimes people have a very narrow view of mindfulness. They think it's something you do with your eyes closed, sitting cross-legged. You do mindfulness meditation, and you mindfully follow the breathing or observe the arising and ceasing of thoughts and feelings and so on. And that can be practicing mindfulness. But mindfulness is a quality where you're bringing up presence of mind in all situations at all times. So you can be mindful of driving a car, and you need to be to drive safely, because it means paying attention, doesn't it? So mindfulness is a quality you bring up can bring up at any time in your day. And so the object of your mindfulness, what you're focusing your mindfulness on, can change. But it's a very useful quality. So if you're mindful when you're driving your car, it means you're careful, you're present. And it's usually practiced together with another quality, sampajanya. Sati is mindfulness, sampajanya, clear comprehension or clear all-round knowing of what you're doing. So say you're driving a car, you're practicing mindfulness, sampajanya, clear all-round awareness, will say, well, we're going on this route, in this direction. What is the speed I should be driving? Are there any obstacles ahead? What's the best way to drive this car at this time in these conditions? Is there a lot of traffic or no traffic? Is it raining? Is it night? Is it day? So sati and sampajanya together come together to help you drive well. What happens when you lose your mindfulness and your clear comprehension? You're lost in a daydream maybe, or you're talking to someone, ignoring the road, or you're lost in your daydream, or you're falling asleep. Driving becomes a very dangerous thing then, doesn't it? The more you lose mindfulness, the more risk there is in driving a car. Could be eating food, often eating food we're not very mindful. We're just tucking in because we're hungry. We like the taste, so we're eating a lot of it, enjoying it. Maybe there's people with us, so we're talking. Often we're not that mindful of the process of eating. But the Buddha encouraged us to be more mindful. So there you're mindful of the food, the purpose of it, is to give you energy and nutrition, the amount you're going to eat. You might be mindful of how much to eat, what's appropriate for that meal. You're mindful of the actual actions you're doing. Picking it up on a spoon or a fork or whatever, putting in your mouth, chewing, tasting, swallowing. You notice if you're not very mindful, sometimes you bite your tongue by mistake. You choke on something. Things happen when we're not very mindful when we're eating. So mindfulness is always useful in every situation, a very mundane situation like eating, putting on your clothes in the morning, or meditation, or a very kind of important task that you're doing where you have to be very focused, like someone doing an exam or writing a report or communicating with other people. We can be mindful of our speech. So mindfulness is a quality that supports many other useful qualities arising. If you're practicing mindfulness of speech, you may be reflecting when is the right time to speak, when is the right time to listen, what are the right words to pick on this occasion to get my message across, whatever I have to say, the tone of my voice, the person I'm speaking to, who are they? You talk to an adult different from a kid. Is it someone who's just a friend, or is it a work colleague or my boss? Mindfulness helps you to pay attention so that clear comprehension can also see what's needed. And then wisdom comes in, understanding the importance of the situation, the relevance of it, what are you trying to achieve at this time? So mindfulness supports wisdom and understanding, and then we apply it at all times, whether we're meditating or whether we're just going about our normal business. As I said, even falling asleep at night, you can practice mindfulness. Waking up in the morning, practice mindfulness. There really is no limit to the practice of mindfulness and the benefit it brings us. Often it keeps us out of trouble. We don't know what life has lying ahead. What's going to happen to us tomorrow, or later today. We don't always know what's coming. And often in life, things are fairly predictable, but sometimes unpredictable things happen. People say things that are unexpected. Events unfold that were unexpected, unplanned. How do you prepare for the unexpected things in life? Well, you practice mindfulness, and it brings you to that ability to be present in the moment, and then allows your intelligence, your wisdom faculty to decide, what do I need to do now? What's the right thing? What will help reduce my suffering or end my suffering, or help reduce someone else's suffering? So there's plenty of scope for developing more mindfulness in life, at work, at home, in our meditation, and in all aspects. So keep doing it. And one important thing to remember is when you put effort into developing mindfulness, it's a very powerful good karma, and it's a conditioning factor for the arising of more mindfulness. You notice there are some people who seem to be naturally mindful. Oh, they're so mindful, the way they speak, the way they do things. Or when they meditate, they can sit so straight for so long, follow their breath. Usually that's a sign that that person has practiced mindfulness before. And mindfulness breeds more mindfulness. And the Buddha even said one way you can improve your mindfulness is spend time with other people who practice mindfulness. If you're with someone who's mindful because they've been practicing already, well, you often, it rubs off on you a bit. You become more careful what you say, more attentive, take more interest in what you're doing, pay more attention because you're with other people who are doing that. Similarly, if we spend our time with people who don't understand mindfulness, don't practice it, aren't mindful, then that can affect us. And so, when is the time that's hardest to be mindful? You go to some party or social event where people are drinking and enjoying themselves, okay, but they're often not very mindful. Or if you're in a meeting and everyone's really angry and opinionated and arguing and not listening to each other, some kind of discussion or dispute going on, well, it's going to be very hard to maintain mindfulness in that situation. So mindfulness will be a condition for more mindfulness, and things improve in that way. Another question. Dear Ajahn, if there is a constant thought that arises in the mind, say worries or an event or desires for something that constantly coming up in a very consistent pattern, should we just return our mindfulness to the breath, or is there an underlying issue that needs to be investigated further to resolve these thoughts? A good question, and possibly you can't just give one simple answer to that. You have to see what's going on in your mind. If you practice meditation regularly, you will probably find there are recurring themes of distraction or certain mental states that come up often for you. Anger about work, or worry about your health, or worry about someone you love. There'll be different things that are coming up quite often. And you'll find that sometimes whatever you do, you can't turn to your meditation object and let them go. So yes, sometimes we do have to investigate these things and look at what is the underlying attachment here and try to understand it better so that maybe you can settle your mind quicker and more effectively. Sometimes if it's, say, anger towards someone, they've hurt your feelings, annoyed you, and whatever you do, you can't let go of that. You just keep remembering it, thinking about it. You can't stay with the breath. Well, sometimes it's appropriate to bring up the practice of loving kindness, direct it to the person, try and think of them in a better way, think of their good side, think of the good things they've done. Try and see something that you've got in common with them, even though they may have hurt you, annoyed you, whatever, but try and see something good in them or the common humanity so that you can relax your mind and let go of the anger. That's one example. So you turn to contemplate that issue because there's nothing else you can do. It's just overwhelming you, so you need to work with it and understand it better. Some things you just have to be very patient with. Sometimes your mind is just very agitated, and whatever you do, you can't let go. You can't seem to establish much mindfulness. You just have to patiently be with it for a while, and you just follow along, watching all these restless thoughts come up, keep going. But if you're patient enough, you may find after a little while you can see that the whole mood and the train of thought passes by, it ceases. It could take 15 minutes, say, I don't know, it just depends. And you're watching and you find, eventually that train of thought passes, it's gone. And if you're still following along, watching your mind, you might recognize at that point, this was impermanent too. It was really agitating, bothering me for so many minutes there. Now it's stopped, it's gone. It's impermanent too. It may be quite an important thing, agitation, worry about health or work or something, but eventually your mind drops it. And you can say, it's impermanent. And that's quite an important insight because you've got that in the future now. You can say, I've been through this before. Next time it comes out, you say, I know this is impermanent. It's only going to last so long. I don't need to feed it, worry about it. I'll just watch it and it will pass because I've seen it pass by before. So sometimes the reflection on impermanence helps, and you can bring it up over and over again and say, I know this is impermanent. What is impermanent is not really me. It's just a mental state with its own energy. And you allow it to go its course and then it passes. And you'll get better at that. The speed with which these things pass by and end may improve, and you let go of them quicker. Other things, you have to contemplate and bring up some wisdom to help you to let them go. And sometimes you fail. You're sitting meditating and the same old issue is bothering you for a long time, and you're working with it the best you can, but there seems to be nothing you can do. So you just keep patiently watching, learning from it, and just experiment a bit. See what works to help you get through that particular mental state. Can you see it from some aspect of impermanence? See the suffering of it, the agitation of the mind, the lack of peace. See it as not self. You have to question what's going on sometimes. You bring in these reflections to help you. Occasionally the Buddha even said use willpower. Just grit your teeth. He said take your tongue, push your tongue on the top of your mouth. That's one way. Grit your teeth and you just sit there and you're just going to keep trying to meditate whatever's bothering you until something changes. And inevitably it does. You don't have one mind state all day long. Things come and go. So you look and learn, and you're trying to develop the higher knowledge from the place of awareness, mindfulness and wisdom that sees this mind state is impermanent, it's not self. And you keep working on it and you get better over time, but you have to keep practicing. There's another question. Ajahn, if a wholesome action is done without the thought of me, I, or mine, then there is no karma created. Is that correct? If so, then there won't be any merit to dedicate and share. Well, it's only really the arahant, the one who's reached nibbana, who makes no karma. All their actions become what we call giriya, which is they're just acting out of wisdom, compassion, in an appropriate manner in a certain situation, but there's no sense of self and no karma made. There's no causes for further birth. But up until that point, we haven't reached that point, so we're still making karma with a sense of self. There's still a person making karma, receiving karma. In the conventional sense, that's correct. We still have to speak like that. And so our practice is largely, as I've said earlier, we're creating and bringing up and preserving wholesome karma, and we're trying to restrain ourselves from developing unwholesome karma, or if it has arisen, we're caught into unwholesome mental states rooted in greed, anger, delusion, and we're trying to abandon them. So, normally for communication purposes, we say there is a self who is making good karma or bad karma. We are trying to abandon our unwholesome volitions, trying to cultivate our wholesome volitions. And so when we do good things like meditate, offer dana, do acts of charity, acts of kindness, we consciously keep precepts, like today you're keeping the 8 precepts or the 5 precepts. Acts of goodness, good karma, when done consciously with a volition, we can dedicate them. So we dedicate them to our parents, grandparents, ancestors, to some friend of ours who's passed away, someone who's sick, whatever. We can dedicate the goodness of our actions. But of course, as we're doing this, making this good karma, practicing, we are developing the reflective ability of the mind, the ability to contemplate our experience. So the Buddha said, as you do good, try not to attach to the good you do with a sense of self. So that's tricky, isn't it? On the one hand, you're developing this intention to do good, then you do it. You do your dana, you keep your precepts, you do your meditation, but then another part of your mind, if your mindfulness slips and your wisdom is not clear, you might say, well, I did that good thing, I am a good person, and you attach to it. That's something you keep reflecting on. You keep purifying your view by developing insight into impermanence and the selfless nature of phenomena, even the good things that we're doing. It's like the good feelings that arise from meditation or from acts of kindness and compassion, say. They're genuine good feelings, but then we try not to attach to them, grasp onto them with a sense of self. We recognize they've arisen out of skillful action, but then we let go of that self. So we're not craving more good feelings or grasping at them as self. We're just knowing they've arisen as part of the practice, but then we let go. So this is another part of the whole practice of doing good, is you're reflecting that there is nobody who does good or experience the fruits of that goodness. Even though a good action was done, results happened, we're not attaching to the results. That's a reflection, and you keep doing it. And you see, what happens when we don't do that is we fall back into the old way of thinking. Me, I am doing good. But with a sense of self, we attach and identify with that sense of self, so it can give rise to conceit, pride, jealousy, competition. So like you might do some act of charity. So you come to a temple and you make some offerings, which is good, and you feel good, but then you look across and someone else has offered something a bit different than you, bigger or better in your opinion, and then you feel hurt or sad. Oh, their dana is so much better than mine. Or you're meditating and then you hear about someone else who seems to be able to meditate for so much longer, and they go into such better states of samadhi and they see things and have these amazing experiences, and you look back at yourself and say, well, I can't do any of that. So even though you're doing something good, the sense of self forms and you start to suffer, even though you're doing something good. So we're constantly developing some wisdom to reflect on what we're doing, and to see where that sense of self is forming, and to teach ourselves to let go. So Ajahn Chah used to say, you do good, it's good. You don't need to think too much more about it. You don't need to sit there praising yourself or boasting about it and telling others. You just know, oh, I did this good thing, it was good, and you move on. You maybe do more in the same vein, do more of that, but you try not to get stuck on it and dwell on it with a sense of self, without attachment. And that applies in every aspect of the practice. You do the good, and then you let go. That way it's really good. And that's where you're practicing what we call making karma for the ending of karma. We can't help it. Half the time we're practicing for some reason, aren't we? To get something. So we want to get heavenly rebirth, or to be well known as a good person, to get a good reputation, to feel good, occasionally even to feel better than someone else. Or we want to get some particular result. We do good so that this other good thing will happen in our life. We'll get rich, or we get the job, or we get whatever we want. That's where we're looking more deeply and rooting out the sense of self, because that can come with greed. Greed for results, greed for self-view of who you feel you are. I'm a good person, doing all this good here. Or the other, problem is you're trying to do good and then you feel you haven't done good enough, so you start to feel self-critical, or feel that you've got no goodness in you because you've tried and it hasn't worked, your meditation's no good, and you can't do dana very well, and you can't keep the precepts, and you don't understand Buddhism well. So people like to come to the monastery and they say, I'm not a good Buddhist, and on it goes. So we tend to either go to the feeling of self-aggrandizement or self-deprecation and self-criticism. What we're really trying to do is maintain our mindfulness, or mindfulness again, and then reflect our reflective ability to see, well, a good action was done, but nobody did it. It was just a good action that's following the path, furthering the path of practice, but letting go of the desire for results or attaching to the sense of self that forms around the good that was done. So you just do it. And you let go, and you're doing that over and over again. So if you practice meditation, say, the sense of self arises, you let go of it, it may arise again, you let go of it, and you get into a good habit of catching the sense of self, letting it go. So little by little you're experiencing less of this sense of self and more of just the qualities, the skillful qualities of the practice are being developed. The mindfulness, the insight, the energy, the patience, the faith, the kindness, compassion, they're all arising, but there's no sense of self forming around them. Another question. Lompo, how do we overcome dukkha from dukkha? The dukkha of dukkha. Suffering from suffering. Don't attach to the suffering, just know it. Suffering is to be comprehended, not to be grasped at or identified with. First noble truth. You make suffering into a noble truth with mindfulness and awareness and understanding, recognizing this is suffering. This is like the way it is. This is the way it is. And then let go. What we tend to do when we're not so aware is, I'm suffering and I don't like it, and then we create more suffering out of the suffering. We react with aversion or fear or worry, anxiety, And it's a kind of self-perpetuating process. It's a cycle. So, like the Paticca the explanation of how suffering arises, the Buddha gave, it's constantly in motion, self-perpetuating. It's like a wheel that just keeps rolling. The wheel of the Dhamma is rolling in the opposite direction, in the opposite way. It's the wheel of bringing up mindfulness, clear comprehension, effort, wise reflection, and letting go. Letting go of the sense of self, letting go of the attachment, letting go of the suffering that arises from suffering. Judging yourself, complaining, pulling your hair out, beating your breast, crying. Okay, suffering happens, life has suffering in it, but try to meet it with the Dhamma rather than with the sense of self, because the sense of self will always make it worse, won't it? We'll build on it, we become drama kings and queens. Or like the dog, they showed me the video of the dog who was had to have his claws clipped. And they go up to clip his claws, they grab his claws, and the dog looks and he's in horror. He's getting his claws clipped and he faints. I've never seen a dog faint. It's just like so dramatic. Oh, they're clipping my claws, and he just faints in shock. And we're all like that sometimes. Sometimes it's the needle, you're going to get your jab. You haven't even had the jab yet, already the needle is out and people faint. I've seen monks faint at the sight of blood. Sometimes someone cuts themselves. I once went on arms round with a monk in Thailand, Ajahn Kalyan's monastery, and every farm has a vicious guard dog. And they have guard dogs, they train them to protect their property. And so when you're a monk and you go in first thing in the morning, 2 or 3 monks walk to a farmhouse to collect some food. The owner is very kind, but the dog has no understanding of that. He just sees you as enemy. So quite often they run at you and try and bite you. Sometimes they do. And one time we went into a farmhouse and there were 3 dogs, 2 big ones and 1 very small one. And the 2 big ones, they were trained enough, they would stand there barking, but they wouldn't do anything. But the little one was not well trained. Not only would he bark, he'd bite. So he didn't bite me. We received our food, we were walking out. He went for the last monk and he bit him on the leg and blood came out and he turned around, the monk saw the blood and he just fainted. And everyone stopped and was stunned. They said, wow, how did a little dog do that? But it wasn't the fact that the dog had seriously injured him, it was just the blood and he fainted. That's like dukkha from dukkha, isn't it? Something bad has happened and then you react to it. Usually you don't faint, but you build it up in your mind. You get angry, you get worried, you get afraid, you think about it endlessly. So mindfulness, bring up the mindfulness. When dukkha strikes, be patient, be mindful, bear with it. And that often helps it to pass by quickly. And even if it's slow to pass by, well, just be mindful and patient through it rather than making it worse. So whether it's illness or injury or the words of other people or disappointments in life, establish mindfulness. Or dukkha feels like this, so there'll be feelings, painful, unpleasant feelings. Be mindful of it rather than building it up into something else. And everybody finds, if you practice this, an awful lot of our dukkha and suffering disappears quickly when you bring up mindfulness and patience. Because you realize the real dukkha is in your mind. You're creating dukkha and suffering out of some dukkha. So, the dog bites, okay, it's unpleasant, but just bear with it, clean up the wound and move on. Whatever it is in life, somebody is really rude to you, okay, it's unpleasant, it hurts, but it's happened, just bear with it and establish mindfulness rather than flying into a rage or spending the rest of your life upset about it. There's big dukkha, there's little dukkha. Obviously big dukkha is hard to bear with, but the way of practice is still the same, trying to be patient and mindful and not latch on to the experience and let it feed more negative thoughts, more self-hatred or hatred of others, more feelings of guilt, more feelings of grief. Often we get caught into grief for ourselves, grief for others, feeling sorry for ourselves. When dukkha happens, my dukkha, my world has collapsed. All of this is feeding more dukkha out of the original dukkha. And so we're trying to establish mindfulness, bear with the dukkha, and then it will pass by quicker. Of course, it takes practice, but that's what we have to do. Another question. Ajahn, as you shared, sensual desires are very hard to overcome, especially sexual desire and desire for companionship. In fact, it is hard to arouse the desire to overcome our desire for these worldly pleasures too. The mind does not want to take on the work of contemplating a sūpa, reflecting on the potential for sadness when we depart from those pleasures or attachments. Could Ajahn offer some encouragement and advice in this respect? I find it very hard, especially since my peers are all getting married. There is a fear of missing out. I find joy in the Dhamma, but am not that well practiced to constantly attain Dhammic joy to let go of my worldly attachments. Well, the Buddha taught on many levels and gave us a kind of a gradual practice, a gradual training. So to stay single and celibate, say, is not for everyone. So the Buddha said you can have a partner, fine, have a partner, but try to keep the 5 precepts. Be honest in your relationships. Have one partner at a time, one is enough, and try to be faithful, honest to that partner, compassionate to them, and build a loving relationship. That's fine, especially if it's somebody who has a similar view to you, maybe has faith, interest in Buddhist teachings, then you maybe have a better relationship. And people in the time of the Buddha attained to stream entry, like Visakha and Atapindika. They were married, they had children, they lived a worldly life, they had jobs, but they still practiced the Dhamma. So for some people that's appropriate. Other people maybe are ready to become Sangha, monks and nuns. Other people not sure. So Ajahn Mahabua always used to say, if you haven't found a good person to live with or practice with, stay on your own is better. Rather than being with someone who is a troublemaker or brings you endless grief, someone who doesn't keep precepts, doesn't trust you, they're dishonest, they're unreliable, whatever. Stay on your own. If you haven't found a good companion, stay on your own. Just getting a companion for the sake of it isn't necessarily a good idea, because you might choose somebody who just brings you endless suffering and becomes an obstacle for your progress in the practice. Some companions are very wise. They're wiser than we are, so they're Kalyana Mitta and they lead us in a good way. Some companions are like Mara and they just lead us to disaster. So if you are going to choose a companion, choose wisely. You say you have a fear of missing out. Well, you'll miss out on some things, but you'll gain others. You try and look at things in a balanced way. There's always advantages and drawbacks in every situation. So if you stay single, you miss out on a lot of dukkha. That's an advantage. Less arguments, less jealousies and worries and fears, less of a burden, maybe. So, you may gain something with companionship and love and marriage or whatever, but you may also lose things. You lose certain freedoms, you lose time, opportunity to practice, and so on. So try and look at things in a balanced way and just see what's appropriate for you. There's no one right answer here. Stay single, get married, both. There's a place in the world for both. And if you want the easy way out, well, just become a monk. Easy. Give up on sexual desire, on relationships, develop your samadhi. Your samadhi will bring you enough happiness and contentment. You don't need a relationship. You don't need to follow sexual desire. Only leads to disaster anyway. So try and decide what level of practice you want to be on. You can have a partner if you wish, fine, choose a good one, or you stay single, become Sangha, or stay a layperson. Just try and make a good decision. Think about it. Don't rush into anything. Some people, they rush into, the first person comes along, they hook up with them, and then ends up in disaster. So if you haven't got a partner yet, don't rush into it. Just take your time. And if no good person arrives, we'll stay single. Easy. Time is up, so we'll finish the Q&A session there.